Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint River Basin Drought Assessment webinar for the month of April. My name is Rachel McGuire, and I am with the Auburn University Water Resources Center located in Auburn, Alabama. If you're new to the webinar, we will have time for comments, questions, and discussion at the end after all of our speakers have gone. You can also use the question box on the GoToMeeting tool panel to type any questions or use the raise your hand icon by pushing that on the tool panel as well. And as a reminder, speakers, just unmute yourself prior to speaking and give me a cue when you need your next slide. Our speakers today will be David Zierden from the Florida Climate Center at Florida State University. He is the Florida State climatologist and will be speaking with us about our current drought status, our seasonal forecasts and outlooks. We'll also hear from Tom Littlepage from the Alabama Office of Water Resources, where he is the branch chief, and he will be giving us state of Alabama input. We'll hear from Paul Ankhorn, a hydrologist at the USGS South Atlantic Water Science Center. He'll be speaking with us about our current stream flows and groundwater conditions. And we will hear from Troy Ephraim and Cynthia Donald from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Mobile District on our ACF reservoir conditions. We'll also hear from Jeff Dober from the Southeast River Forecast Center on our Streamflow forecast for the ACF. And last but certainly not least, we'll hear a little bit from Meredith Muth of NIDIS, the National Integrated Drought Information System, on some updates for our region. And with that, I'd like to start with our first speaker, David Zierden. David, are you ready?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I certainly can. I'll get you started.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rachel. To begin this webinar this month, there's a couple different items kind of in the weather and climate news recently. So we'll start out with those. And of course, top of the list is all the severe weather we have seen across the Southeast United States in the month of April. It began on Easter Sunday. Over on the left is a photograph of one of the tornadoes that ripped across southern Mississippi. This was an EF4 strength, and at some places wrought a path of destruction up to 2 miles wide. So really a really strong tornado and a really significant weather event all the way around. On the bottom left, you see the velocity, radial velocity radar image from that tornado, and also its sibling as they proceeded across southern Mississippi. And these are some of the strongest and most classic signatures of rotation that you see on the Doppler radar. So really a significant event. Over on the right, there were 133 confirmed tornadoes all the way from Texas up through Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas for that Easter Sunday and early the next morning for the event that happened then. But then we had another round of severe weather just a couple of days ago on Sunday and Monday that we had at least 11 or 12 confirmed tornadoes. And fortunately, I don't think there were any fatalities with that round of severe weather. But in case you were tired of it, over on the bottom right is the day 3 convective outlook from the National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center, where it's already showing an enhanced risk of severe weather across much of the ACF Basin, the Florida Panhandle, most of Georgia, southeast Alabama. So looks like we have another round of severe weather on its way this coming Thursday. So on the next slide, it's the severe weather was not the only threat that came with this succession of low pressure systems and storms. It's also dumped copious amounts of rainfall across central Georgia and Alabama and northern Georgia and Alabama. And responding to this rainfall, over on the left is the hydrograph for the Apalachicola River at Bluntstown. We see after this last rain event, the stage is already approaching minor flood stage and is expected to crest in the next couple days near moderate flood stage. And this hydrograph and this forecast doesn't even take into account the potential for rainfall with this next system on Thursday. So the shape of this graph and also the potential flooding is bound to get worse with this next system coming along. And over on the right just shows from the National Weather Service where flood warnings are in effect for much of the Apalachicola River in the Florida Panhandle, also portions of the Flint River north of Albany, Georgia, but also shaded in the light green, there's a hydrologic outlook that warns of more and widespread possible flooding on other rivers and streams, and even possibility of flash flooding later this week. And while this map ends at the Tallahassee County warning area, this hydrologic outlook does extend all the way through nearly the whole state of Georgia. So we've got more rainfall on the way. On the next slide, we'll start taking a look at where we stand right now. And some of this information is from Victor Murphy at the National Weather Service Southern Region Headquarters. He passed this along and it's some really great information. This first slide is an accounting of rainfall since the beginning of the year, since January 1st. And it's the percent of normal rainfall year to date up through yesterday, as a matter of fact. And what you see across the majority of both Georgia and Alabama and all of the middle and upper ACF basin, at least 150% of normal rainfall since January 1st. And where the darker purple is, that's over 200% or twice normal rainfall so far this year. So just widespread and very abundant rainfall has this whole hydrologic system really at the top of its limit. One other interesting fact, yesterday at Columbus, Georgia, I believe it was yesterday, they reported 5.92 inches of rainfall, which was not only a daily record, it was the second highest daily total in that station's history, going back to prior to 1900. So really an extreme rainfall event this past weekend. On the next slide, we'll see the rainfall from that event. What is this? This is 24-hour totals for April 20th, and you see the broad swath colored red, which corresponds to 3 to 4 inches of rainfall over a wide area of central Georgia and Alabama, and even a band that's shaded pink corresponding to 6 to 8 inches of rainfall or more. So already full river system, got quite the dumping on this past weekend. On the next slide, we'll take a look at some of the station data. This is from Sawtee, Georgia. And again, this is accumulations since January 1st. The red line is average for this time period. The light blue line is the previous record year to date from, I believe it was back in 2000, or it was last year, 2019, where you see this year we're even eclipsing that. And again, we're looking at over 150% of normal so far since January 1st. The next slide is from a different station. This one is in Jonesboro, which is near the headwaters of the Flint River. And here you see the same story. The yearly accumulations are far surpassing the previous record and certainly surpassing normal. And right now we're looking at nearly 33 inches since January 1st, which is close to twice the normal accumulation. So just very heavy rainfall, a repeated pattern we've seen all winter long. On the next slide, we'll start taking a Bill. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. On the next slide, we'll start looking at the current drought status, and there is still drought remaining and even intensifying in the area, especially in the state of Florida. Now the majority of Florida is covered in moderate and even a fairly large patch of severe drought as we went through an extraordinarily warm and dry March and the first half of April. So drought is still intensifying in Florida. Luckily, in the past week, we did get some relief. On the next slide, we'll take a look at that. Oh, no, just one more remark. This is the temperature and rainfall totals for the month of March over the state of Florida. On the left is the temperature departures from normal, daily average temperature. And we see departures of 9 to even close to 10 inches across the western Florida panhandle. But the remainder of the peninsula averaged 5 to 7 degrees warmer than normal for the entire month of March. And over on the right is the total rainfall for the month of March. And there might have been an inch or two across North Florida and the panhandle, but once you get south of Gainesville or so, really the monthly totals are only in hundredths of an inch. So that really contributed to a quickly developing almost flash drought, if you will. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at more recent precipitation. And these are radar estimates of rainfall over the last 7 days. And like before, you see the swath of very heavy rainfall across central Georgia and central Alabama, but also along the Florida Big Bend area and North Florida, widespread amounts of 2 to 3 inches, even more in some locations. So very welcome and will help alleviate the drought to some degree in North Florida. Further down the state, we're only looking at 1 to 1.5 inches of rainfall, even much less along Southwest Florida, where really the drought is continuing to intensify. So on the next slide, we'll start looking ahead at what we can anticipate. Again, with this next system coming through on Wednesday night and Thursday, more heavy rain is forecast for central Alabama, central Georgia, northern Georgia, and much of the ACF Basin. This is the 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast where amounts of 2 to 3 inches or more are forecast from this next system. It also looks like a little more rainfall is possible over North and Central Florida, which again would be good news to what was a quickly intensifying drought in the state of Florida. On the next slide, we'll take a look a little further ahead, and this is the week 2 or 8 to 14 day outlook, and it's a probabilistic outlook from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. And it does hint at a pattern change and drier than normal conditions building in over the second week of our forecast cycle. So that's good news that after this next storm system later this week, we might have some more settled weather, not so much severe weather, and certainly a break from the plentiful rainfall. On the next slide, we'll look at the Pacific Ocean and see what we can anticipate further out. And while certainly NOAA's CFS version 2 has been hinting at a transition to La Nina phase, the ocean hasn't gotten the memo yet, and it's still mostly warm anomalies that have been persistent in the central Pacific Ocean, but are even starting to kind of reappear in the eastern Pacific. Still not strong enough or coherent enough to be called El Nino phase, but certainly a far cry from being in the colder La Nina phase. And looking at the Nino 3.4 index on the bottom, we're still right around that ½ degree threshold. Not really consistent enough to call it an El Nino, but certainly on that side of zero. So on the next slide, we'll see what the forecast for the Pacific looks like, and the thinking is kind of along the lines that I just told you. The gray bars through March, April, May, and all the way through the summertime are or the probabilities of continued neutral conditions, which is by far the strongest possibility, over 50% through the summer. As we get into the fall, it's kind of a mixed bag. No real clear indication of which phase it might slip into as we go into next fall and winter. And over on the right are the different ENSO prediction models for the Nino 3.4 area. And as you can see, they're kind of all over the map. Some are warmer than normal, some are colder than normal. There's even a few outliers, including NOAA's CFS, that are pretty aggressive in predicting a transition to La Nina, but we really haven't seen any indications that's happening in the Pacific Ocean yet. So all those really need to be taken with a grain of caution, and we're still really more in a wait and see mode than being able to anticipate what the phase will be by late summer and fall. So with that in mind, we'll look at the seasonal outlook from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. Very similar to last month, with a large part of the country, with the exception of the upper Midwest, forecast is a increased chance of above normal temperatures, which is certainly consistent with the trend we've seen in recent years and decades. Over on the right is the precipitation forecast, which shows a continued increased risk of wetter than normal conditions. So that's certainly good news if we're trying to anticipate drought, which really is not on the radar at all at any time soon in most of the ACF basin. So with that in mind, we go to the last slide, which is the seasonal drought outlook, which reflects what I said. No mention of drought other than in the very lower coastal regions of the lower ACF basin, where the northern Gulf Coast has missed out on a lot of the rain. And we see over the peninsula of Florida, with anticipating the summer convective rainy season beginning in second half of May or early June, drought is likely to improve as we go along, but we're in pockets where it's the worst. It may persist for a while. So with that, we'll go ahead and summarize on the last summary slide. We've had a very active severe weather seasons thus far in the month of April, with another round likely on Thursday. Currently, there's flood warnings on the Flint and Apalachicola rivers, and the hydrologic outlook warns of more widespread flooding with this next system. The year-to-date rainfall over central and northern Georgia and Alabama, that should be 200%, is running 150 to 200% above normal. However, moderate and even severe drought are now affecting the majority of the state of Florida. Over the state of Florida, March temperatures were 5 to 9 degrees above normal, and much of the peninsula receiving only fractions of an inch of rain. Our 7-day forecast calls for multiple inches of rain over the same saturated areas of central and northern Georgia and Alabama. Some possible drought relief for northern and central Florida. The week 2 and beyond forecast does seem to favor a pattern shift and drier conditions for the southeast. We are still in neutral conditions in the Pacific Ocean, and that's forecast to remain through summer. A possible transition to a different phase is still highly uncertain at this time. And the CPC seasonal forecast favors higher chances for warm temperatures and also higher chances for above normal rainfall. And drought should improve with the onset of the Florida rainy season, and ACF is most of it, the middle and upper basin for sure, is not just likely, it's certain to remain drought free for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I was in Auburn and Lee County, Alabama. I was in the swath of that 6 to 7 inches of rainfall. So our feet are still a little wet, even though it's been sunny and windy today. Now I want to turn it over to Tom Littlepage of the Alabama Office of Water Resources. Are you ready? Tom?
I'm ready. Can you all hear me?
Sure can. I'll get you started.
Yeah, speaking of Auburn, during this last severe weather on Sunday, I saw that the Weather Channel was down in Toomer's Corner because of the flash flood issues. So it was kind of interesting to see them focus on that area of the state. So essentially, Alabama is a tale of two states. As David so eloquently alluded to, there's been a lot of rain, especially in the northern part of the state. However, this is the current drought monitor, which alludes to primarily some abnormal dryness in those yellow patches you see there. But in Mobile and Baldwin County in the southwestern portion of the state, D1, and even last week, the introduction of D2 for that portion of the state. So it's kind of been problematic in terms of looking at our statewide assessment. Next slide. But in general, it reflects that there are no issues. We've had no reported issues with regards to either drought impacts or with regards to flows. I didn't put a slide up, but we have a website that's available where we weekly update 72 regulated and unregulated sites around the state. And as you might anticipate, most of those gauges are showing normal to higher flows. In fact, on the Chattahoochee, we're showing some gauges that are hitting record highs, and that's reflective of the fact that so much water is coming downstream. Next slide. And then just to highlight that event that was on Sunday, you can see just the sheer magnitude of the rain that occurred across the state, but it has continued to miss that southern portion of the state and the panhandle area that David alluded to. And we were hopeful, or are hopeful, go ahead, next slide, to show that with the rainfall forecast, and again, David showed an updated version of this chart, that some of that rain would hit the southwestern, or yeah, that problem area of the panhandle in southwest Alabama, but I'm not sure. Okay, next slide. So the challenge has been, this is our current drought declaration. What do we do with this given these conditions where the vast majority of the state is not only in non-drought conditions, but actually wrestling with excessive rainfall? Looking at the crop progress report that USDA NASS puts out, it had a lot of issues associated with fields being too wet to get into to prepare for the spring planting season. So that is sort of problematic of where we are. Okay, next slide. So in summary, as I alluded to, tale of two states, the vast majority of the state is in very good shape in terms of drought conditions, no real problems. The extreme where we've got some flooding and high flow issues associated with that. There is some more rain, and we're anxious to see what happens with this next front that's moving through, I guess, on Thursday and Friday. And we're going to continue to monitor those conditions. And then last slide. So although there's no scheduled meetings of the MIG, we are looking at, depending on what this front does, whether we need to revise our statewide declaration to reflect the conditions that are occurring in Mobile and Baldwin counties. That's something that will be interesting as we, this would be something we would have to do under the COVID restrictions of so much remote, or everybody being remote. So we've got a system in place to handle that, and I think we can anticipate we wouldn't have any procedural issues with that. And so we'll make a decision within the next few days whether we're going to call a meeting of the MIG and actually deal with those conditions. So with that, kind of short and sweet, but be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. So now I'd like to turn it over to Paul Ancorn to give us our streamflow and groundwater conditions. Are you ready, Paul?
Yes, Rachel. Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
All right, I'll get you started.
All right, so yeah, we'll begin here with a look at current conditions. So you can tell from that previous rain that our stream flow is definitely up within the region here. Majority of the stations in the ACF are currently ranking in the high, with other gauges above normal, and the only real normal conditions are down on the lower reach right now, and the Florida Panhandle, as has been discussed. We have seen some improvement in North Carolina. There were quite a few gauges showing much below normal flow in our last brief, and just worth pointing out that recent rains have at least alleviated some of the dry conditions in North Carolina, but conditions as a whole as of this morning are ranking high to much above normal for most of the ACF basin. All right, we'll look at the next slide. And these are our below normal 7-day average stream flows. So not a lot of change from the last webinar. We're showing obviously some below normal, even moderate hydrologic drought on the Panhandle down there, and in the southwest corner of the state of Georgia, small basin, showing below normal conditions. So we'll move to the next slide. And we'll begin looking at 28-day average flows. So these are the daily averages for the previous 28 days, ranked with historical daily flows. So Chattahoochee River, Cornelia, and Chestatee, Dahlonega, these are both inflows to Lake Lanier, and the 28-day average flow for both currently ranked above normal, with the previous month there, both stations showing new record high flows. So adequate flow for sure into Lanier. Next station, we'll move to our gauges downstream of Lanier. So Chattahoochee River at Atlanta is just crossed from the much above normal into the above normal, so right around the 90th percentile there for the 28-day average flow. And then further downstream at Whitesburg, right at the 80th percentile for above normal flow. All right, next slide will take us further downstream. Chattahoochee at West Point and Columbus, both currently ranking above normal. And then the next slide, we'll start looking at the Flint River Basin. So Griffin and Carsonville, both right at the 50th percentile with 28-day average flows at the normal range. Next slide, further downstream, we'll look at Albany and Bainbridge, flows for the 28-day average, both ranking as normal conditions there. And then the last slide for the stream flow is Apalachicola River at Chattahoochee, and again there, 28-day average flow is well into the normal range. All right, we'll begin now on the next slide looking at groundwater conditions. So this is our real-time network. And you can see with the current brief on the right there, the graphic showing the majority of the stations are showing groundwater levels to be within the normal range. And then a couple of stations are above normal. And then one station over to the due west of Albany is right at below normal. But the two that we look at on our monthly basis here are circled there, and we'll take a look on the next slide. This is Miller County, and the conditions now currently ranking in normal for groundwater elevation. And then the next slide is Dougherty County. And again, there we've had some fluctuation in the past month, but conditions there are currently ranking as normal. So we look good for groundwater elevations within the basin. All right, the last slide, we'll just wrap up with a summary. So stream flows in real time for the ACF basin are currently in the high to normal range. No portions of the ACF basin are currently ranked below normal according to the 7-day average stream flow. The 28-day average stream flow for the Chattahoochee River are currently in above normal rankings, And then Flint River is showing the 28-day average flow to be in the normal range with real-time groundwater conditions ranging from high to below normal, but the majority of the sites are in normal range. So good news, and as our previous speakers have alluded to, no signs of drought. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So now I want to turn it over to Troy Ephraim or Cindy Donald. I know Cindy's on the line about our ACF reservoir conditions currently. Do we have one of you ready to go?
Hey, Rachel, can you hear me? It's Troy.
Yes, I can hear you. Perfect, Troy.
Okay. Okay, we'll start at Lake Lanier, Beaufort. Current elevation there is 1071.99. And right now we're getting ready to reach our summer refill of 1071. So we're operating in zone 1 and we're expected to remain there over the next couple of weeks. Go to the next slide. All right, at West Point, current elevation 635.04. We reached induced surcharge earlier today, and so we're passing our inflows of about 29,000. And right now we're projected to stay on track with our summer refill and get to our elevation, target elevation of 635. Next slide. And at Watershed, George, current elevation 191.2, which is the same story as West Point. We're operating in induced surcharge. We're discharging about 72,000 with inflows at about 85,000. And on May 1st is when we enter our summer refill to refill back to summer level of 190. And currently we are on track to meet that target elevation as well. Next slide. Jim Woodruff in Lake Seminole, current elevation is 77.54. We requested for discharge there to be about 75,000 today, with inflows currently at about 80,000. And we're projected to stay, operate pretty well there. Next slide. Here's our basic composite conservation, and we're in zone 1, and we're projected to stay there over the next couple of weeks. So over the summary, I think it was mentioned before that we've seen some pretty above normal inflows, like Lanier, Watershed, George, and West Point are operating above guide curve. We expect our projects to approach guide curve over the next few weeks as the summer refilling begins or continues at some of our projects. And the ACF system conservation storage is in zone 1, and we're projected to stay there over the next few weeks.
Okay, thank you very much, Troy. And now to wrap things up, I'll turn it over to Jeff Dober for our Streamflow forecast. Are you ready, Jeff?
Hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, super. Okay, so you probably have seen this graph a couple times so far. This is the past flood event, and the rainfall graph on the right side of the screen there is our multi-sensor precipitation estimates that have been shown a couple times so far in the presentation. And this is our gauge radar estimates that basically come out of our office that are quality controlled each hour. And you can see the heaviest rainfall with this past weekend's event. We're across middle Chattahoochee and the Flint River there with really 3 to 6 inches of rain, some higher amounts, and caused us some flooding, and it's continuing to cause ongoing flooding there. Right now we're looking at, as Troy was mentioning, they're an induced surcharge down there at WF George. So the flood wave is still moving into that part of the lower Chattahoochee. And then in the Flint, right now the flood wave is sort of in between Carsonville and Montezuma. But right now near Bankful or floods ongoing or forecast down on the lower Flint, lower Chattahoochee, and that'll make its way down to the Apalachicola here, as David pointed out in that hydrograph early in the presentation. So widespread minor flooding for the most part in the Chattahoochee, Flint, and Apalachicola, and somewhat unusual as we're in late April here. And we think that those high flows will continue. We can go on to the next slide here. And this is our mean daily stream flow forecast. This actually should be May 21st through June 21st. So this takes us basically into the close of spring. And we're basically still going with the current trends. And as Paul was pointing out, normally the stream flows start to fall off here as we go into the month of June after we've been in the green up, and usually our flood climatology supports that we don't see a lot of flooding as we go into May, but or actually this should be April 21st through May 21st. But as we go into the late spring here, we're calling for above normal stream flows, and that's based on many of the things that you just heard from Paul, David, and others. Now, as we work into the 3-month daily stream flow forecast, this has our ensemble stream flow prediction pie charts, and you can see for the most part favoring chances of above normal. The best chances seem to be favoring above normal. And again, this is the fact that we've been trending above normal. It's been wet. It doesn't, you know, our ensemble forecasts don't include CPC's outlook, but as David pointed out, it looks like right now looks like we could have a wet summer, and so all those factors combined, looks like we're going to probably see stream flows for the most part on average stay in that above normal range. We may have some dry pockets or periods, but for the most part, the best chances are for above normal stream flows as we head through the summer. So that's it from the Southeast River Forecast Center. And again, just in summary, we're looking at above normal, following the trends and the supporting factors, above normal stream flows as we head through the summer.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And now I'll turn it over to Meredith Muth. She has a few updates for the ACF Basin.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Well, today's assessment, we spoke mostly of above water conditions, above normal water conditions, and more on the side of flooding, but we do know that drought conditions will return at some point in the future to the ACF River Basin. And so we would really appreciate your assistance and your input in helping us improve information to assist with early warning and assessing drought in the ACF River Basin. And so to do that, NIDIS is partnering with Albany State, Auburn University, and NOAA's National Center for Environmental Information to develop an ACF drought dashboard. This will be an online web resource to focus on drought information specifically for the ACF, but also broadly for the states of Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. We are holding 4 listening sessions. These were one-day events, and we've moved these into 2-hour virtual listening sessions. The dates are listed April 29th and May 21st. The first one is already full. We do still have a few spaces in the following 3. If you have not signed up, please do sign up. This will be an interactive virtual listening session, and we are limiting it to 40 people per session. And feel free to share this information with others that you know that would be interested. Next. And also related to drought early warning, NIDIS is expanding upon our regional drought early warning system for the ACF River Basin to develop a Southeast regional drought early warning system. And this is to promote and encourage sharing of information across the states and lessons learned, and to target specific needs related to research, communication, drought monitoring, and other activities to improve drought planning and preparedness. We will be distributing a survey in the next couple of weeks. If you receive it, please take a few minutes. It's a very short survey, and share that with others. And this will help inform some near-term activities that this regional network can focus on. And that's all I have today. Thank you, Rachel.
Hey, Meredith, this is
Meredith.
Tom Littlepage. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I was looking at this and I saw your email. Would it be appropriate, given the fact that we're limiting attendance, to send this out to our MIG distribution group, which may have some duplication with some of the folks you've already contacted, but it's about 100 folks.
Absolutely. Are you talking about the listening sessions for the drought dashboard?
Yes.
Yeah, please. Actually, for both of those and for the NIDIS survey, please do send out to the MIG. I think it's an incredibly appropriate audience, and we would like to make sure that we have perspectives from a broad diversity of agriculture, water, tourism, etc. Anything that would be helpful from the state, regional, as well as sub-state, local perspective would be great. So please do share.
And on that vein, have you updated the handout? Can you send me the latest? Didn't y'all have a one-pager?
Absolutely. I will send that out. And also, if you go back one page, Rachel, we'll make sure that this is the link to that handout is also included in the recap email that Rachel will be sending out tomorrow. But there's also a link on the bottom that has additional information. Okay. But I'll get you a specific one that you can just forward on. Thank you for asking, Tom.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get that out, and I'll try to include you on the list so you'll see what went out.
All right, so now's the time if there are any other questions or comments for any of our speakers. Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can use the chat box in the GoToWebinar toolbox. And it looks like we have a question for the Army Corps about the reservoir refilling. The question is the reason the reservoirs are high, well above the guide curve, because they are unable to release the water fast enough with all the recent rain and stay closer to the guide curve, or is refilling early included in the operation plan as normal action?
Hey, Rachel, it's Troy.
Oh, hey, thank you.
Yes, so currently we are in the refill period at Buford, West Point, and Walter F. George. And one of the operations is flood control for downstream. So in order to not contribute to downstream flooding, we usually hold on to some of the water when it comes, especially in the flood time like now. And before, we were just a little above guide curve to ensure that we would reach our summer refill target elevation. So it's a combination of both the refill time as well as flood operations control. I hope that addressed the question.
Thank you, Troy. And then also we've had a request if you could repeat the release anticipated at Woodruff. Yes.
Currently, we requested for them to go up to 75,000 today. And with what we saw fall on the Flint River, as well as what we're discharging at Walter F. George, we're expecting to peak at about 85 to 90,000 total discharge.
All right, thank you, Troy. Any other questions or comments from anyone today? If we don't have any other questions, I'd like to thank our speakers, David Zierden, Tom Littlepage, Paul Ancorn, Troy Ephraim, Jeff Dober, and Meredith Muth. Also, thank you to Victor Murphy, who provided some additional information to us for today's webinar. I apologize for my spaniel barking. My name is Rachel McGuire, and I'm with the Auburn University Water Resources Center. My contact information is listed. If you need to be added to the reminder listserv or the briefing summary emails, please contact me. Video recording of the webinar will be posted online through YouTube within 24 to 48 hours, and our next webinar is Tuesday, May 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for being here today.